Hey, Cubs fans. Welcome to another episode of Talking Cubs presented by CubsInsider.com. I'm Ryan Davis. I'm your host. I'm today not joined by Sean Sears. He was unable to make it, but what's the next best thing? I got the guy who is the main guy at Cubs Insider. Evan Altman is joining me. Evan, we're talking about the Cubs playing the Brewers this weekend. It was not what you were hoping for, but I guess it could have been worse if we're going to be positive about it, right?
Yeah, I mean, it could have been where they could have lost all three games. They could have not scored a bunch of runs. They could have had the bullpen implode again in Sunday's game. So I think there are some things that we can take away from it that we can look at and say, yeah, I mean, there's some progress. It felt better than Atlanta, but still not perfect.
Yeah, well, I mean, there are a few keynotes. They sent Carl Edwards Jr. down to AAA, which I think a lot of people were really expecting to happen. They put Mike Montgomery on the injured list. So they brought up Kyle Ryan, who has pitched okay, and they brought up Alan Webster, who a lot of people are a big fan of. I'm actually a pretty big fan of him. He throws relatively hard. He misses bats. He has a good slider, and really missing bats is the main thing the Cubs bullpen needs. Do you think that there is some hope for this bullpen to eventually kind of figure it out and be good enough, or is this just going to be a tire fire all year?
I mean, it feels like, right, we talk about all the time, bullpens are fickle. Like, I've probably worn that phrase out among other people, but you figure they have to get, they can't be as bad as what they have been. You think, and so yeah, I mean, are they going to show up and be perfect and be kind of the unit that Theo Epstein keeps kind of alluding to what they have been? I doubt it. But if the starters can get to the point where, again, they're not giving up a ton of early runs, I think that does help significantly, and things should even out here over the long run.
Yeah, I mean, there's obvious regression due back to the mean. I think that people overreact to a degree because everyone kind of expected the bullpen to be bad, but nobody could have expected this. And anecdotally, their ERA as a team of like 7.87 is a full run above their FIP of 6.93. So obviously they've been pitching better than their ERA.
Yeah, that's what I love. Is like their ERA is worse than their FIP, but their FIP still sucks. It's like it's not one of those where you look at it, you're like, oh man, it's totally bad luck. Like, no, they've been really bad. But a lot of that was the guys that you saw, like Carl Edwards, where you just cringed, like when he was going out, and you felt like, oh, Madden's going to give him the soft landing with the bottom of the order. Not so much, and so making some of these changes and doing this whole performance over talent, right? Production over talent, whatever. Ideally, this gets to the point where, and they do have guys, they've talked about that. They have guys at AA and AAA who should be able to come up, and whether that's Dakota Mekas or Dylan Maples or James Norwood. I mean, there's other guys there that are waiting that I think, like you said, can miss bats, can get out there and pitch some innings and get some clean outings under their belt and move forward. And I think that's really what the momentum that they need to see is a couple good outings like what we saw Sunday. And I think that helps tremendously moving forward.
I don't want to harp too much at the bullpen, but something that we've talked about before or early in the season is, in an era where every bullpen has like guys throwing 98 miles an hour and missing a bunch of bats, maybe if those guys walk people, or, as guys who throw hard with great stuff often do, this bullpen is built around guys who throw 92, 93, 94 miles an hour and should be controlling their pitches, but aren't, and are walking guys. And so far early this year, it feels like the juiced baseball is back. The walks have been a bad thing, but the real issue so far has been the walks have been followed by 3-run homers out of the bullpen. The ball is just jumping when these guys are making contact. So is that going to be something that ends up just destroying the Cubs? Because I think that if guys are just going to hit home runs at a crazy pace like in 2017, this bullpen is just doomed because they don't miss bats.
Yeah, and I think that's kind of the issue, right? We've seen this trend toward these triple-digit pitchers, and you just roll guys out there who are all 95 miles an hour and above, and mix and match, right? Lefty, righty, different styles, different arm angles. With the Cubs, it's kind of this. I don't want to call it completely finesse, but
Yeah,
that's kind of what they're going at. And like you said, if they don't miss bats, there's not a whole lot they've got out there that they can really throw at you that you're really scared of as an opposing team. And I think that's the thing. Like we saw that today with Josh Hader, who when he comes on, like you're going, okay, this guy's got to make a mistake if we're going to do anything against him. With the Cubs, it's like, okay, if these guys aren't perfect, we're going to be able to get something done against them. And I think that's where there's just zero margin for error. And that's what's a little bit worrisome is they don't have those guys. And with someone like, again, I know people are down on somebody like Maples because of the walks and things like that. But again, he has the potential to go out there and just scare the hell out of a team with what he can do if he's on. They don't have anybody else like that until Brandon Morrow comes back. Maybe Pedro Strop, when he's right, can do that at times. But they don't have enough of that. And that's the real problem is that how do you bridge from whatever the starters do, and unfortunately it's been too short, to then the seventh, eighth, ninth innings. And consistently they don't have those guys who scare you and who can lock that down.
Yeah, I think that's an important point is if the ball is going to continue jumping the way it has early in the season, and that not just in Cubs games, if you look around the league, there are a lot of teams who have had some kind of issues in the bullpen and with their rotations because the ball is flying. If that is the case, then yeah, I feel like a guy like Maples is a little bit more palatable because he does have the stuff that he will strike guys out and miss bats. So that is an important point. Before we end on this, I want to talk a few other positives on the offensive side. Wilson Contreras and Victor Caratini have paired up to be just absolutely phenomenal. And then Jason Heyward, I have this stat. It's very cherry picked, but going back to last June when he really started to break out and show that he can be this average normal hitter again. 365 plate appearances going back to June of last year. He's slashing 286 with a 345 on base and a 431 slugging with 8 home runs and 109 WRC plus. So that's a slightly above average hitter with great defense in right field and center field. Is this good enough from Jason Heyward? Do you think that this is something that can continue for him?
I mean, it kind of has to be good enough based on what we've seen so far. I mean, it looks like, right, we saw his first multi-homer game as a Cub. He had 3 homers in 2 games, and seems to be a little smoother up there. So, yeah, if you look at it, I mean, 365 plate appearances, that's not a full season by any stretch, but that's enough, I think, that we can draw some conclusions and say, hey, this guy looks a little bit better. And certainly, if we look at the way that he's, again, a left-handed hitter, so you can keep him in there against the righties, even if you platoon him, he's going to be in there most of the time. And he is showing signs that he can really be that guy who I think, and against power pitching, he's actually been pretty good. And I think that's something that we've seen from these Cubs, and that they don't really deal with that. I mean, just look at the way the Brewers attacked him, and it was high heat. And really, some of these guys, Chris Bryant in particular, has been off his timing. So Heyward has actually been the guy who's the breath of fresh air lately. Even if that slows down a little bit, I think you're still looking at a guy who's like you said, certainly palatable to have out there as a Gold Glove defender and right who can show occasional pop and get on base and run well.
Yeah, I think Hayward really is kind of the key to this offense right now because of how great Wilson Contreras looks. Kyle Schwarber looks like he's going to be able to crush righties again this year and maybe improve a little bit on last year with going back to the crouched batting stance at the plate. And then, obviously Chris Bryant's kind of slumping, but the assumption is if he's healthy, he's going to be hitting well again. So they really have this deep lineup now that is healthy and good top to bottom. And Jason Heyward was kind of the one guy they were just like, well, if you don't get anything out of him, whatever, you haven't really gotten much out of him for the most part for the better part of 3 years. So this is kind of like, wow, Jason Hayward's like third on your team in OPS right now behind only Contreras and Victor Caratini. So yeah, if they can get, who knows, he's not going to hit 40 home runs, but if they can get 15 to 17 home runs out of Heyward with reasonable on base, man, that is just phenomenal to get from him at this point.
Yeah, and I think again the the fact that he's third on the team is one thing. The fact that the 2 catchers are first and second, or at least that your backup catchers, like that's another thing. Like, okay, does that last? But it's a good sign for now because you're saying, hey, right now, the guys offensively really carrying the team are not the ones you anticipate, or at least 2 out of 3 of them are not the ones you anticipate. So, okay, what happens when Chris Bryant gets hot, when Anthony Rizzo gets a little more consistent, and he's typically kind of a slow starter. I think there's reason to see that this offense has improved in terms of their overall consistency, other than really the one game where they got shut out. They had some late rallies, but they're showing they can score runs. And I think at the end of the day, that's what you figure, even if the pitching staff isn't perfect, they kind of return to a little more normalcy. And if the offense can continue to put up runs on a regular basis, they're not going to continue to go through 2-7 stretches. That's going to flip flop. They're going to pick up more of those games, especially as they face some opponents like the Reds. Maybe the Pirates, even though they're hot, but the Reds really suck. So the Pirates, got over on them. It does start to balance out over time. They get home. They've been away from Wrigley for so long and away from Chicago for so long. You just figure a lot of good stuff is kind of in the offing for them at this point.
Yeah, that was going to be my final point to bring up to you. Obviously, the first 9 games, not good. 2-7, that's not what you were hoping for. It almost feels like going back to Wrigley for the home opener. This is kind of a reset. You're doing your home opener. You got John Lester back on the mound. You had a 4 shutout innings by the bullpen against the Brewers, even though you lost 4-2 on Sunday. This kind of feels like you have another 9-game stretch coming up. 3 against the Pirates at home, 3 against the Angels, who have been bad. Mike Trout's been the only one hitting for them. They won't have their DH at Wrigley. So Pujols, who's actually been one of their better hitters so far this year, is going to have to be on the bench. Their pitching's not great, and it looks like the Cubs are going to line up to face some guys who aren't, like Trevor Cahill and other guys that you wouldn't think could be overpowering them. And then you go to Miami to play the Marlins for 3. So they have this 9-game stretch where it's like, okay, if you go 6-3, feeling okay about where things are at that point.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's kind of how it all goes, and people have looked at that like, how do you look at 9-game segments? You break the season up, maybe not series by series, but in 9 games at a time, and you just look at, okay, can we win these? And 2-7, like you said, admittedly, it doesn't matter who you are, that's bad. But again, you go 6-3, and then maybe 6-3 again. Well, gosh, now all of a sudden you've picked up those games that you lost. Now you're over 500. Now you can kind of continue to go, and with a 162 game season, there's a lot of room in there to make stuff up, to get back with some of these guys, and to just pick up a game at a time here and there. So yeah, I think being back at home, being in front of the crowd, and just sleeping in your own bed again, right? These guys haven't been able to do that. They haven't been able to establish a real routine because they've been on the road for so long. I think that'll help tremendously. And again, maybe having some tomato cans to punch around will help as well. So we can only hope.
Right. Well, thank you for joining me. This has been another episode of Talking Cubs, which is now presented by Cubs Insider. You are the head honcho at Cubs Insider. Why don't you let the Talking Cubs fans know where they can find you?
Absolutely. So if you check out Twitter, I'm at the Evan Altman. Go to CubsInsider.com. Check that out. You can buy awesome shirts like the one I'm wearing right now, which I can't really show very well on here, but it's the Own It Now. It's fitting that it's WrestleMania night, and this is kind of based on a WCW meme from back in the day or whatever. But anyway, yeah, I'm over there at Cubs Insider. You check out our Facebook page at Cubs Insider as well. And, we've got all kinds of fun stuff over there, including this YouTube show.
We're very happy to be on Cubs Insider and partnering with you guys. We think that's great for all of us. If you guys like the video, give us a thumbs up, go down and leave a comment, share it with a friend, tell everyone you know about how much you like this show.